Live.
All right, we're back after lunch. We are back here today with,
So I just did hide non-video participants. And
you just have Ron Wild on there. Do we need to invite the room?
I did invite.
yeah, and this shows the room as live and Ron is hidden on video.
Zoom is sleeping.
Tech stuff.
It's frozen. It's
Literally.
too cold.
Your kids probably didn't
It's
have.
above.
Okay.
What's that?
I don't
Said
know.
it's above me.
Oh, it didn't. Okay.
That
don't
means
have
you don't have to worry about it.
Show warning
Right.
at 5 right now.
I usually just pull the plug,
To get it later.
30 seconds.
put it back in and it figures itself out.
And so for our guests, just as a clarification, if we can't get onto YouTube, we can't go on. And so it's just a new policy that kind of the electronic extension of the open door policy.
We're still not
We're
getting anything.
Yeah, so our,
Yeah,
That's on.
yeah, but we're not getting.
stop and start.
Mm.
Some people really bundled up on the floor.
It's great.
Oh,
Here we go.
Like out in front.
should I try hiding on?
Yeah.
Just completely glazed over.
Yes. That's that labor duct tape alone. Okay, that was live, so thanks everybody for, we're gonna just like take two. We are back after lunch to follow up with some testimony on H66, which is an act relating to paid family and medical leave insurance. We just finished yesterday our walkthrough with Damian Leonard, our legislative counsel. We've had some good conversations so far, but I wanted to make sure that business representatives in particular, there's a member of, there's a couple business owners who are here to talk about it, but we just wanted to get testimony on this particular bill. I think one of the, if there's anything, with respect to this bill, if there's anything positive about our experiences with the pandemic, it was to see what the needs were for Vermonters in particular, for us, for leave policies. And not to say that the things were missing beforehand, but again, we were given an opportunity to see what needs have arisen. And so this is our next opportunity to consider this bill, and I wanted to invite folks in. So Austin Davis is here, who we met a couple of weeks ago from the Lake Champlain Chamber. So Austin, please.
Yeah, for the record, Austin Davis, Director of Government Affairs with the Lake Champlain Chamber. It's good to be back with you all on this very cold Friday after lunch. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to speak on H66. I think I'll just start and open up by saying we're neither testifying in support of this proposal, nor are we testifying against this proposal. We're here to have a conversation about the elements of the proposal, how they'd affect employers, what the impact might be on the economy, and how, if you are to proceed with this proposal, it might be changed to be something more manageable and functional. Our economy doesn't have infinite tax capacity, just as a natural ecosystem has a rate at which you can sustainably harvest from it before you irreparably prevent it from regenerating. So does our economy. We lead with this because we can't look at this proposal in isolation. There are hundreds of millions of dollars, cresting $1 billion worth of proposals making their way through the legislature right now, and that have been put forward this biennium by a dominant caucus who has the numbers to enact them. So when we see this proposal, we don't just see this proposal. The proposal seeks to use a payroll tax, and there's an ongoing conversation downstairs about using, and upstairs, about using that revenue source to fund childcare, which is a longstanding goal of ours and others. And meanwhile, at the same time, there's been legislative conversations about moving education property tax to income as well. All of this is pretty daunting to our employers to look at, and it can be understandable given the whiplash of the last few years, the global pandemic, issues with supply chains, inflation, et cetera. We're also looking at consensus revenues forecasts that show a contraction in state revenues next year that rival that of the 2008 recession. And we've got about 2 out of 3 economists that are the legislative economists and the administration's economists cited when doing that revenue forecast, saying that we're likely to see a recession in the next 18 months. I know that's not something we like to say, and I hate using that word. It's something to take into consideration, though. So I'll stop there just for some questions on the initial context, or I can just jump right into kind of some of the content of the bill as we read it.
I think this is a question I always have for business groups, which is that balance between the businesses and the people who allow the businesses to exist, which are the employees.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we go into a calculation of, when you all go into a calculation of how is our employees part of the mix when we talk about the need for housing, the need to attract people to Vermont, to there's been talk about the needing to attract more people, especially younger people, because anybody born today isn't going to be working till they're for another 16 years. Where does that play? This is definitely, while this is on the face of it an employee-friendly bill, we don't think it's only an employee-friendly bill. We do think that there is that employers want to be able to offer a benefit that keeps their employees, whether it's satisfied, keeps them healthy, keeps them in place, makes them want to come here. So I'm just curious. I just want to toss that on the table. And
yeah, I was in this committee a few weeks ago, and we talked about issues of housing, childcare, and benefits cliffs, among other things. And I think that it is, we're talking about essential functions of government to be able to facilitate these things. And there is a natural amount of extraction from the economic ecosystem that's necessitated to be able to do those things in the form of taxes. So we're not going to say that this isn't something that necessarily is a negative to employers. What we're talking about is highest marginal benefit for lowest marginal cost. There are a lot of competing proposals on the table that help employers and employees. Certainly housing, childcare are amongst those, and we're testifying in other committees and engaging in other committees on those issues. If we were to raise $85 million on, via any particular revenue source, such as this bill is looking at, is the highest and best use of that finite amount of money this particular purpose? Could that be better leveraged in other places? Is there a way we could do a program such as this in a more efficacious manner that doesn't cost as much? And so I can get into a little bit more of that in the content of the bill and some suggestions there as well.
Sure, Representative Kresno?
Hi, I'm curious, what some of the initial the outreach has been with your members, with business owners, but also with employees. So far, I know that this isn't, the first time that we've been discussing this kind of program, so it's not new to some folks, but I'm just curious what the level of communication has been with your members.
Yeah, so when talking to our members, I think, we certainly hear more of a desire to see a privately administered fund and program similar to that the governor's proposed, similar to that was passed actually back in 2019. That legislation was actually had a version that included elements of the governor's proposal, where potentially such a program could be administered by a third party vendor that was contracted. that was designed as a mandatory program with a premium and a premium or tax that was unavoidable for the parental leave, and then an optional premium or tax that could extend to disability leave, which is the more expensive component of the program. So, all of these, I think at that point it was a 0.38% payroll tax that would have been for the parental version with the additional rider of a 0.4% payroll tax, if memory serves, for the disability. So I think folks are amenable to different versions of this. I think you talk to anybody, they're kind of doing the calculations, and more and more, in the last years, I've talked to employers about what they're offering for benefits. We're seeing more and more employers, well, in a competitive labor market, try to attract talent by adding disability insurance as kind of a next step. So certainly there's, a diversity of opinions among our membership on this. And I think we can kind of adequately reflect that in some of our further points.
Thank you.
So just for clarification, I think the final bill that passed through and then we did not override the veto was 0.20% for family and medical leave, but not personal leave. Personal leave would have been adding it up to roughly what is in this bill now, which is the last
0.38.
estimate was 0.55. So that's just over a half a percentage point. Representative Elder?
What are your concerns, if you have specific concerns about what this bill considers, which is to create a new division within the Office of the Treasurer, as opposed to the private administration? I mean, I know you prefer the private administration. I'm just trying to understand if there are some specific concerns about the plan to create a new division in the Treasurer's office, or if it's just sort of the newness in general, just sort of try to fill it out.
I think we have a few concerns around that. First and foremost, I think that we would like to bring in outside expertise, and the easiest way to do that is actually to contract for such a service. It's something we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Plenty of folks do this. Many of our employers, for example, with the with the governor's version that he's moving forward on right now, that contracts with the Hartford Group. Hartford Group already has similar insurance with many large businesses within our state and smaller businesses as well. I think when we look at the startup costs, between 20 and 80 million that this bill projects, that could be significantly leveraged if we were to bring in a private insurer. It could even potentially, for example, be used to buy down rates for an introductory rate to get folks into the system early, get them adjusted to it, make it less scary for them. I think also we have some concerns about the legislature coming back on an annual basis and setting the tax rate or the premium. It'd be better to have an actuary do that at an insurance company that's doing that in other spaces and has a universal view of the economy and all of the factors that might create risk in any given fiscal year. So I think there's a lot to be gained by running towards expertise rather than standing it up on our own.
Thanks.
So if you wanted to just give us a quick rundown of, and again, being conscious of the time and whatnot, but if you just give us a quick rundown of the bill itself.
Yeah, well, I think I have a couple more points that are kind of bill adjacent, but I think first and foremost, the governor is already moving on a voluntary version of this that contracts, as I said, with a outside insurance carrier. We'd highly recommend working with the administration to see if there's some version between your bill and what he is currently working on that could best meet your mutual goals. And as I said, the version that was previously passed under the biennium did do that to a large extent. And as I said, we're interested in seeing it privately contracted. We're curious as to how many employees a new division within the treasurer's office would need, what the actual ongoing costs of that would be, what outside knowledge they would need to contract to be able to do that, and all that. As far as the bill goes, I think, one of the large components of what we believe is that the cost of carrying the premium or the tax rate should really fall on the employee. And I don't just say this as, to try to push off a tax burden. This comes from a perspective that regardless of what happens, even with the employee carrying the cost of the premium, there's a significant cost associated with this on the employer. There's a good 2014 study by Kronos with the Society of Human Resource Management, where they actually equated unplanned leave to basically be the equivalent of about a 6% payroll tax. So that's kind of complying with existing unpaid FMLA. So when we think about these costs associated with the leave for the employer, we're talking about loss of productivity, the cost of hiring and recruiting a temporary replacement, overtime costs for employees who stayed, as well as the stress to management, all the costs that are associated with the employer accommodating for this leave. So these are things that are kind of being borne now, and with higher utilization of leave while it's paid, those costs will go up. And I think that is more than a fair share under this potential proposal of a cost for an employer to actually to handle. In short, complying with this falls squarely on the employer. And if you add a payroll tax with that, you'd be adding additional tax to what is effectively already a hidden tax. Let's see here. We have concerns around annually adjusting the tax rate. As I said, we've seen challenges in making benefits and costs changes in a special fund in the offices of a treasurer in the past, which actually created an unfunded liability so large that we're still clawing our way back from that unfunded liability. The current unfunded liability that we deal with, we pay actually every year the equivalent of doing 2 of these programs. So I just point to that as a reason to kind of put more structure and guardrails on any program in terms of rate making. In the past, when we've talked about in earlier iterations of this program, how to handle the financials issues arose, and the answer is just to raise the tax, and we think that answer is just inadequate, and we'd hope that something can be done to reassure us about this proposal and proceed. We envision that a well-designed system would have internal safeguards and procedures to avoid having to raise the tax, and that it'd be a counter-cyclical program in terms of its rate making and trust fund management to accommodate economic downturns. We don't want to be in a position, if this proposal goes forward, where we hit an economic downturn or, heaven forbid, another global pandemic. There's a rush on it, and because we've built this in a pro-cyclical manner, that rush is corresponded with an increase in tax rates while folks are using it. Any kind of such program, you want to, be built up in the good years so that the tax rate can remain low and the benefits high in bad years. So that's something that we just want to flag if you're going forward. Going further into the weeds here, I think the generosity of the program is, laudable, but we think that 12 weeks and 100% wage replacement is a tall ask for a brand new program. If you'd want to go forward, certainly suggest starting small and building the program as it sees success would be a better way to go. Additionally, most insurance programs, full stop, generally do not provide 100% wage replacement, so that there is a nudge or price signal for folks to use it more efficiently. And this doesn't have to be done in some draconian way, but 100% doesn't provide any nudge or or price signal. We also recommend against including bereavement leave, at least an early iteration of the program until, facts on the ground can be fully understood and it has a track records of success in the core functions of such a program. We have concerns around self-employed individuals. They should definitely have a different base period and a required time in the pool before drawing on benefits to avoid adverse selection. There's a large potential for adverse selection that would add a lot of volatility to the pool, the risk pool, if a person can opt out or into the pool at any given time, given life circumstances. I think this is something that's accommodated in a lot of similar insurance policies such as this. And I believe other folks who have tried to build such a thing, including the governor's version, do try to accommodate this. You don't want a person saying, I'm going to jump into the risk pool today because I know I'm going to need this in 6 months, and then use it and then say, okay, I'm going to jump out of the risk pool. I think that's something to be somewhat of a concern. Going forward, I think that, we like to see more attachment to the workforce than just 2 quarters of wages. Previously, there was a wage threshold requirement that was envisioned in order to participate into that in the program. And that was somewhat around the amount of taxable wage base that had ended up in it to prove eligibility. That's something that needs to be worked out and explored further. We'd also suggest capping contributions at the Social Security contribution maximum for consistency and ease of compliance, as well as to better align the marginal benefit that the program offers to individuals with the marginal cost for those individuals. Right now, you're at 200%, I believe, of the maximum Social Security. We'd like to see that just stay at 100%. I can't remember what that number is off the top of my head anymore. It's moved so much with inflation, but I believe it's about $136,000. We'd also advise against the provisions around tax refunds for individuals making less than $25,000. Individuals in this tranche at most are contributing at $72.50 to the program, while potentially receiving about 80 times that in benefit. All those utilizing this program, if it would be passed, should be contributing to the program. And given the generosity of the benefits you're envisioning, it's not a lot to ask these individuals who are already seeing the highest marginal benefit at the lowest marginal cost to contribute that amount of money. And then I think we're getting close to the end here of my notes. I'm sure there's more. This is what I've been able to cursorily glance at this, go over. But sections 1 and 7, 13E, subsection 13E, is a very broad and encompasses particularly everybody, which I think creates ample room for fraud, adverse selection, and dilution of the benefit at the individual level. That could potentially prevent a claimant from actually using the benefit in a highest and best use or bona fide reason for a family member in need. I think it could potentially even go so far as to opening up individuals to poor budgeting of eligible leave, and an instance where if the universe of who falls in the category of family is so broad that a person who is just loosely acquainted family, let's say, could use it, you might use it, your eligible leave on them, and then not have it in a situation where you have a closely related family member who might need it. That's something to consider when developing these kinds of things. And then just generally, the definition is so broad that it is really ripe for fraudulent claims and could prove to be an absolute adjudication nightmare. So with that, I think that's a lot. I'm sure there's more as we kind of unpack this further and hear other testimony throughout the weeks and just get a chance to reread it a few times. But that's all we have for now, and I'm open to any questions.
So And yes, I see you, Representative Rose. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Do you have any numbers on retention rates of employees for those who have paid leave versus those who, or employers who provide paid leave versus those who don't?
I do not.
And do you have any numbers on the cost of hiring new employees versus the cost of paid leave?
I do not. I think those would probably be questions best suited for the Joint Fiscal Office.
Thank you.
You have a member who works an insurance company that would be able to say offhand, or somebody who consults that can say, here's this plan, this is what we're doing, right? I mean, your testimony is saying, you said, okay, well, maybe this would be better off if it was a private company. Part of the problem we have here is that we're not the private company. So there's no way of knowing whether or not we can compare a private insurance cost to what's being proposed here. This is a full plan. There is some conjecture in it about what startup costs are, but there's some pretty known knowns here. And so when the gist of it being, this would say that it's a mandated program, not voluntary, and we would accept private programs if they were proven to be as generous as this program. So and this is a question for any business group that comes to testify before us, is there someone that we should hear from who can give us a better idea of what a private plan would go for? Because right now we don't know.
Well, I do think that there's ability to do that, and to some extent that's been done. So I would recommend bringing in the Department of Financial Regulation that oversaw the request for proposals to administrate a private plan for the state risk pool. They might have different procurement guidelines in that RFP than what you would be doing based off this legislation, primarily around it being mandatory versus voluntary. But at the end of the day, you could look at your draft legislation as procurement details for an RFP for private insurance. And that's not uncommon in the insurance market.
I'm just not sure whether or not DFR would give us details of a negotiation between the administration and the private company. So you don't have to have an answer today, but if there's somebody that you can think of over the next week or so that we should hear from that might be able to process these numbers, that might give us a different kind of ballpark figure than what we're working with. Because other than that, we're just dealing with a certain amount of trust with. We don't know that a private insurance plan would be less expensive.
I think it's not just about the expense of it to us as well. I think with any kind of procurement, it's never just about expense. There's other deliverables, there's expertise that can be leveraged, there's solvency, there's guardrails and protections for potential unfunded liabilities. There's insulation from political considerations to some extent that could come with procurement as well. So I think those are the things that a lot of our members kind of like to think about in terms of this that I've talked to, and just understanding that and letting experts be experts in what they do instead of trying to reinvent something.
Representative Helen?
Thank you. You mentioned that the governor was talking to the Hartford.
Yes, that's right. The Hartford Group, based out of Connecticut.
Is there a similar type group in the state of Vermont that could do the same work?
That's probably likely. I don't have that set of knowledge. Like I said, I'd probably suggest that you invite in DFR as well as the administration to talk about the RFP process that they underwent and what bids they did or did not get. You're the Vermont legislature too. You could always just send out a, APB to anyone in the insurance market to come here and talk about a potential bid as well.
Because it seems many times when we outsource things, there are problems. A voluntary plan is not going to serve many of the Vermonters that it should. And sometimes people don't think about like family leave, things like that, until something happens. And then it becomes a tremendous issue.
I think we'd encourage to not just think in, siloed terms in terms of like, this is the governor's plan, it's voluntary, it's this, it's that. And your plan in front of you. And instead kind of look at both plans broken up as kind of an a la carte, set of pieces to put together a puzzle. And, I think that there's the opportunity to say, discuss as you have in previous biennia, discuss having a mandatory plan that might be in a private insurance market. There's the option to discuss things such as opt out rather than opt in. There's a lot of interesting research, and actually recently there's federal legislation around employers being able to have employees opt out of retirement plans rather than opt in. So you still have the element of personal choice. However, when you make something opt out, it takes a larger activation energy to do that. And so folks are more likely to participate. Also interesting research around that and organ donation, which that's a whole nother thing, but it's a really interesting concept in terms of kind of these pushes and nudges that affect folks' behavior. Because you're right, folks don't always think about such a situation until it presents itself. And that point, it might be too late. I also say that the governor's program does look at voluntary for individuals, but also voluntary for employers. And it's a competitive hiring market, as we've got a recent 8% contraction in the state of Vermont. This presents us with a 23,000 person gap in our labor force. And so employers might be highly motivated to flock to a plan such as a voluntary one that the governor's suggested that has a higher risk pool and therefore a low carrying cost as one way to stand out and be competitive in the market, the labor market. So these are all things to consider. However, I'll go back and reiterate my earlier point, which is I just strongly recommend against kind of having a potentially us versus them dialogue where here is this plan and that is the opposing plan and here is our plan, when we like to see potentially what might be best for the state of Vermont, which is what has my members putting me here to share today, could be some kind of collaboration that takes the best of both plans. And certainly the legislature has attempted this before, and they would lead me to believe they're capable of doing it again.
All right, last question for Mr. Davis before we move to the next witness, Representative Kretzmann.
All right. Well, I, represent an area which you're very familiar with, the Burlington area. I think for me, COVID really highlighted, the need for this because I think about my friends who had to think about going to work sick during COVID and making those really tough decisions. I think about our age group who is choosing between, helping care for a parent and their sick child. So I'm just curious. I also heard you mention about folks who are low income often the folks working in the service industry, and I'm grateful that we're going to hear from business owners and restaurants. But I was just curious if, since COVID, has that highlighted for those businesses, realizing the retention and recruitment for young folks who are looking for those types of jobs, and how it could boost that for them.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that folks had to go to work sick. I mean, I think there were a lot of resources during the pandemic to try to provide leave, whether that be the expansion of the UI system that occurred, or things such as the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, FCRA leave, which we worked very hard to try to make members aware of. And I think it was a very difficult to manage program that shows how maybe not to do a paid leave program. I think the pandemic did lay a lot of our systemic problems out for us, and my members are thinking about all of them. And I think that's where the difficulty in this conversation comes. We have what I think most folks would call a 4-alarm fire in terms of our housing stock in this state. We have a critical, especially in our area, a critical lack of supply of housing. And it's taking up a lot of folks' income. We're having issues recruiting people from out of state because they cannot find adequate housing to come and fill essential roles. We have people leaving the state because they can find more affordable housing elsewhere. Also, we have long-standing instability and issues of affordability, availability, and dependability in our childcare system. And all of these things taken together cost a substantial amount of money. So what we're talking about here is a judicious process of trying to triage and prioritize what to do. And I think triage is actually the operative word here. It's kind of a dramatic word, but we really do need to understand where to allocate our finite tax capacity to its highest and best use, where it can get us the highest marginal benefit at the lowest marginal cost, especially, as I said at the onset of this, with the understanding that we might be back here next year with a contraction in the general fund and the education fund, trying to plug holes in those budgets and looking for new tax capacity and revenue at that time. So as I said at the outset, I don't think we're neither here to support or oppose this particular piece of legislation. We're here to be a partner and helping to try to triage and understand if this is the highest best use of that finite tax capacity.
All right, we're going to end there with Austin. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a safe and warm trip home, everybody, for the weekend.
Indeed, thank you. You too. All right, up next we have, and I'm going to hopefully not butcher your name, but it's David Dolganow. Okay, I was going to go with the other G, but thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard it once or twice.
Yeah, my family had a business called Dolgens, which made it all the more confusing for everyone I grew up with, because it's actually Dolganow, but they shortened it to make it a little easier and also confused a lot of people.
And was it formerly French?
Russian, actually. Yeah, Russian Jews. So they took off the OW because of anti-Semitism.
Did they do that, or did Ellis Island do that?
My grandfather, David Dolganow, did that.
Yeah.
He started the pawn shop in the 1920s.
Well, this is an interview that's going in a different direction.
So if you're in favor of this bill here, you're going to get a high five from me today. We're going to have fun too, because I'm more here for I'll call it the big picture. I'm a little less in the technical side of this, but.
So before you get started, you have not been in our committee before, so just quickly around, we have 2 members who are missing. They had to go home for kids' illnesses or what have you. So, but Representative Tom Stevens from Waterbury.
Representative Kathleen James, Manchester.
Representative Claudia Lamont from Morristown, Elmore, Worcester, Woodbury, and Potter Stowe.
Representative Emily Krasnow, South Burlington.
Caleb Elder, Starksboro, also represent Bristol. Where are they? Lincoln and Moncton. Sorry, Lincoln and Moncton.
Hi, I'm Dennis Labonte. I represent Linden, Sutton, Newark, Sheffield, Wheelock.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Burrows, Representative Elizabeth Burrows, and I represent Heartland, West Windsor.
I'm Larry Labor, representing Orleans, Essex District 1.
I'm Mary Howard and I represent Rutland District 6.
Robin Chestnut Tangerman, 4 small towns in southwestern Rutland County and 1 in Bennington County.
So welcome.
Thank you.
You are David Dolgano.
David Dolgano, co-founder of Shacksbury Cider, a hard cider company and candy manufacturing facility in Virgins. So,
Welcome.
thank you. So, Vermonters take care of Vermonters. Vermonters are nice people who take care of each other. I'm from Kansas. Go Chiefs.
Yes.
Though I've lived here in Vermont now, as of last fall, for over half of my life.
Rock chalk.
Yeah, rock
Sorry, I had
chalk.
to say it.
Gotta do it. Yeah. They lost to KSU though, which was a sad day. So when people from Vermont visit Kansas with me, they inevitably comment on how nice Kansans are. When my Kansan buds come here to Vermont, sometimes the opposite is observed. Why aren't those Vermonters more friendly? Why aren't people nicer there? But you know what? I find that to be a very superficial judgment, especially coming from a Kansan. Vermonters are nice people. Vermonters take care of Vermonters. We have a great overall education system. We have a solid healthcare system that takes care of our people. We support our elderly population. We have a great road system. We could go on and on. Vermonters take care of Vermonters. So it always surprises me that at life's most challenging moments, the death of a loved one, the birth of a child, that we don't take care of Vermonters. In these moments, we should not have to worry about the security of our jobs. We should not have to worry about the security of our paychecks. We should be able to focus all of our energy, all of our time on being present, on taking care of ourselves, on taking care of our families. 2 weeks for the death of a loved one. If you've been there, you know it's not enough. It's not enough time to grieve. It's not enough time to address all the logistics that come with that, but it's something, and it's a start, and I'm appreciative of the work that you all are doing here on this issue. 12 weeks for the birth of a child, 12 weeks. It's not enough. I think we all know it's not enough. 12 weeks. But it's something, and it's a great start, and it's so much more than is what currently exists, which is honestly an embarrassment and a disappointment. Don't even get me started on childcare for 0 to 5. Save that for another day. But perhaps Shacksbury can serve as a small case study. We made the decision to offer 4 weeks of bereavement leave, 12 weeks of parental leave. We know it's not enough, but it's something. And so long as we're in business, we're going to take care of our people. As a result of making this investment, when staffing up isn't an issue, it has been an issue in so many sectors and for so many businesses. We've been able to attract and retain an amazing group of employees, many of whom are getting married and starting families. And unfortunately, some of whom who have also had to cope with the death of loved ones. This bill will help new businesses get off the ground. It will help small businesses like ours grow into bigger businesses. It will help show my Kansan friends that Vermonters are, in fact, very nice people, that Vermonters take care of Vermonters. What's my little prepared number there?
Well, thank you. And can you share that with our
Yeah,
committee assistant?
yep, absolutely.
Thank you for that. Just when we work on a bill like this, I think we can all have different opinions on what's enough and what's not enough and what's something rather than nothing, et cetera. The way we work here generally is this is the low bar. If this passes as is, or whatever passes, of course, employers, if they can afford it, can be more generous, but
Yeah,
certainly appreciative of the idea of what's enough or not enough.
I mean, yeah, to me, it's just a no-brainer, you know, it helps businesses support and attract new employees. It sends a clear message to young people who are deciding where to live and where to start businesses and grow businesses, that this is a pro-business state that's trying to help, you know, lift up together. So I think on a practical level, it's helpful. On a symbolic level, I think it goes eons toward, you know, that group of people.
Representative Elder LaBounty and then Justin Tangible.
Well, thanks for your testimony, David. If I'm understanding, so you're paying folks to take leave for the leaves that qualify at your business, and are you doing that just like the payroll basically just doesn't stop when they're on that leave, or are you using any kind of insurance program to manage that?
Yeah, it's not through an insurance program. It's just, you know, your pay just keeps on going until they come back.
And so it's 100%.
It's 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And have you looked at the kind of spending that's associated with those leaves? Have you looked at it kind of compared to the payroll taxes that are envisioned in this legislation? How that shakes out for your company?
Yeah, I unfortunately, this all came about pretty last minute for me to come up. So I know generally what that number is, but I wasn't able to kind of punch it in and see how it would measure out. I'd obviously be curious to do that, and we'll do that, you know, in the coming weeks. It's, you know, it's always a tricky thing to challenge. We're a small company. We're only about 20 people. So if you're down a person and you're paying that person, you know, we feel it. Like it's a very real decision, and it's a very real investment. And those are dollars that we could be spending on marketing, on sales, on new equipment, on, you know, so many other places. But just like at some point you got to draw a line and say, look, this is just what we need to do to be people in the world today. And I'm just not going to ask someone to come to work and worry about their paycheck after their parent just died. You know, it's just like, yeah, you have a lot of stuff to deal with. So please take care of yourself. And when you're back on your feet, you come back to work, and we'll figure it out. We had to do it a month ago with one of our, you know, key employees. It's hard, but you just manage. So, and on the flip side, I think it creates, you know, loyalty and commitment to the company because they know we're going to take care of them. And you look at that on a broader sort of statewide scale. You know, we did it with healthcare. We do it in so many areas in the state, but just, you know, with young families, you're just like, what's happening? Like no childcare, no leave. You know, it's just, it's a real barrier to get, you know, to grow that sector of the population.
Representative LaBounty.
Yeah, one of the questions you've already answered, how many employees you have. How long have you been in business?
We'll turn 10 this summer.
10? And what is your retention rate?
I don't have that. I'm sure there's a way to actually calculate that, but I don't have like a, so we've had, you know, our first employee still works for us. You went on parental leave year and change ago. Colin and I are still at it. And we didn't always offer it, when we first started, first 5 years, my first kid, I had the kid and I was back at work, 2 weeks later or something like that.
Thank you.
Representative Santangelo.
Thank you, David, for your testimony. And, one of the concerns we hear is about generous benefits and abuse of them. So I'm wondering, and I know this is a small sampling, but have your employees taken full use of this, like as much as they can when they can, or have they been more selective in their use of it?
Parental leave is really interesting. Our company is mostly men, so it's been, kind of on the dad side, and getting men to take parental leave is like a whole song and dance sometimes. There's like a lot of studies around that. So when we had twins, my wife and I at the start of the pandemic, and, we had recently put this policy into place. And so I took it. I was like, it will be hard for you to find me. I am the co-founder, I'm the vice president. It's going to be to show people that, look, we mean it. Like, take advantage of this. 12 weeks isn't enough, So we've actually had sort of the opposite, where it's like, please go be with, like, take the time. We do 6 weeks if you've been with the company for under a year for parental leave, and 12 weeks if you've been with the company over a year. So we try to create that a little bit of protection in the sense that for the company, you need to have demonstrated that you're here for the long term to take advantage of these benefits. And we do have some, clear definitions around how like bereavement can be applied and, to which family members. And it does leave, again, we're a small company, so we have a pretty good sense of what's going on, with our crew. The one time that was used, I think our employee was out for maybe 5 of those 20 days, and we'll probably take 5 more kind of in the spring, that sort of thing. So far so good. Certainly no abuse of the system, and people liking it and taking advantage of it. I've heard with 3 different hires that it was a big part of why they chose to work for us. So I think it's worth it.
Creating a lot of loyalty and good feeling.
Representative Lamont.
Yes, thank you so much for your testimony. And thank you for all that you do as a business owner and a responsible business owner. And Vermonters are caring for Vermonters. Sincerely appreciate that. Which brings me to my question, because in all of this, we hear a lot about employers and employees, who's going to pay for the tax, all of the things, and abuse of the system. And so I'm hearing your structure and your system, which brings me to a topic that hasn't really come up much. Workplace temperature. So to me, I have never been at your facility. I've only just heard of it just now. And, but it sounds like a pretty healthy work environment. Your work retention is fairly good. The low turnover, I would assume, and loyal employees. And so that's something that hasn't come up. Do you feel, and this is just like a generalized question for folks who may be trying to process the information, do you feel that by having said healthy work environment, providing this service and supplement to your staff as an option helps your business and their quality of life, so that they are able to be well enough and okay to show up and do those things and be committed, to where you're like, no, please take your time, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have, I would say, a pretty progressive sick leave, sort of sick leave policy and paid time off for a company of our size as well. And, it's with PTO, our policy is like we don't pay it out. It's use it or lose it. It doesn't carry over. We want to see you gone for 10 days of the year, like out of the facility, doing other stuff, recharging and coming back to work ready to rock and roll, because it's just, we all need that. And we feel like it just creates a stronger crew. It creates a better work environment, more productive work environment. And again, it allows us to find great people and hold on to them. And as far as I can see as a business operator, if we can do that, we'll be here in another 10 years, which is, it should feel great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your product.
I wish I'd brought some, Friday, I know a guy, so I know a guy.
For all the years that worked at this committee had alcohol as part of its portfolio, and we were kind of we could not receive samples.
Oh, okay, well, yeah. So we're just
I
following the
have some
rules.
in my fridge, so.
Nor could we get seconds from the liquor warehouse. So thank you very much. Committee, and I see we have Randy George on Zoom. Randy, we're going to take a short break let's try to keep it to 2:30.
Because he only has till 3, just so you know.
That's fine. He's up next. So we'll be back at 2:30, folks.